Good morning everyone, today we're going to be talking about all about the EX Augments as well as every single EX Augment available right now as well as what it does. But before we jump into all of that, if you're new to the channel, I upload NGS content daily, so if you do play this game, I would really appreciate a subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin the video. So the very first thing I want to go over are some bugs, basically the incorrect description text on some EX Augments. So there are two EX Augments that have the wrong description. So EX Heavy Attack Protect in the game right now, it says damage resistance plus 15% against non-boss enemies. However, what it actually does is damage resistance plus 15% against boss enemies, alright? So the heavy one is against boss enemies, the light one is against all regular enemies. So just understand that this is a translation error. And another one is EX Patient Defense H. So as we can see here, it says damage resistance plus 5% on HP decrease, but what it really does is damage resistance plus 15% on HP decrease. All right, so these are the two that you want to pay special attention to because what it says in game is currently incorrect. So with that out of the way, let us go through the entire list of all of the different EX Augments. There's a total of 22 different EX Augments over here. As you can see, there's the entire list. I will leave this website in the description below if you just want to read it for yourself. Now, on top of just having the different EX Augments, you may have noticed that behind the name of the augment, there is a letter. There might be H, D, P, R, or X. There's going to be one out of these 5 letters, and these letters simply mean additional stats that it gives you. So H gives you 25 more HP, D gives you damage resistance plus 1%, P gives you 3 PP, R gives you all down resistance plus 5%, and X gives you 15 HP as well as 2 PP. The ones that you want to aim for are going to be X, P, or H. These are the more higher value ones simply because HP as well as PP is just very valuable. The next one that you want to go for is going to be R for all down resistance, and the last one you want to go for is damage resistance. So basically H, P, X are the ones that you want. These are the high top tier ones. Then it's R, then it's D. Okay? Now before we jump into the description of every single EX Augment, I want to make a huge disclaimer, just letting you guys know that all of the EX Augments are good, alright? These EX Augments are designed to enhance your personal playstyle. A great example is, for example, what I think are great EX Augments are not very good for Chrono. Chrono really liked the glass cannon build, so the EX Augments that he's going to be using is going to be very offensive based, while I personally prefer a more defensive based build, so I'm going to be picking a lot more defensive EX Augments. But at the end of the day, all of the EX Augments are good because they all give you at least 4.5% potency as well as 2% potency floor, and that is what really matters. But now with the disclaimer out of the way, the first EX Augment we want to talk about is going to be Dazzle Camouflage. This gives potency plus 4.5%, potency floor plus 2%, as well as threat level reduction even when you attack. So this is incredibly simple. This is very similar to the Ranger Stealth something. I think it's like called Stealth Shot or something, where it just decreases the amount of aggro that you generate when you attack an enemy, so you're less likely to get the aggro of the boss or of the enemies. So this is incredibly useful, especially if you're a range class or you're a class that just doesn't want to take aggro. And as we go through all of the different EX Augments, you're going to realize that a lot of these EX Augments have synergies with each other. But moving on to the next one, EX Endure Pain PB Boost. So potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, Photon Blast Gauge plus 2% on HP decrease, there's a 10-second cooldown. So every 10 seconds, whenever you take damage, it's actually going to increase your PB gauge by 2%. So it's going to charge up faster so that you can photon blast a lot more often. Now this EX Augment by itself might sound really counterintuitive. You're like, oh my gosh, I need to take damage because I need my HP to decrease every 10 seconds. How on earth am I going to do that? Well, again, later down the line, you're going to see there's going to be a bunch of EX Augments that actually mess around with your HP, and thus it has really good synergy with Endure Pain. Next up is EX Enemy Down PP Gauge. Potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, max 50% PP recovery when you down nearby enemies. I think this is good against, slightly bigger enemies when you can't defeat them instantly. So like in a PSE burst, I wouldn't really use this simply because you're just going to be defeating enemies instantaneously, which will actually complement the next one, which is Enemy Field PP Gauge. It gains 6 PP when you defeat an enemy. This is literally the Christia weapon potential right here. But, you know, for this, maybe on more tankier enemies, I would use this because it's just easier to down an enemy than actually defeat it. But, you know, maybe there is some synergy with this. Personally, I don't know what synergies this would go well with at the moment. But as we said earlier, EX Enemy Field PP Gauge, this one does have synergy, especially when you're doing any PSE bursting, because again, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor plus 2%, as well as 6 PP whenever you defeat nearby enemies. There is no cooldown for this, so if you suddenly defeat 3 enemies nearby, boom, immediately you recover 18 PP. So this is very, very valuable, very, very powerful, especially if you're creating a weapon to farm in PSE combat zones and you don't want to rock the Force subclass. Next up is EX Fortitude. Again, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%. When PP falls below 10%, recover 200 PP. There is a 180-second cooldown on this, and the effect only starts after 10 seconds upon equipping this weapon. So you cannot use this on a secondary weapon and kind of just fast swap in order to recover all of your PP when you're really low on HP, because I know that's what we did in the base game. We had different weapons on different scenarios. So for example, if I needed PP, we had a different weapon. I believe it was called like the light stream weapon, where you switch to it and immediately you recovered all of your PP, and then you could switch back to your main weapon. Unfortunately, you cannot do that with Fortitude over here, as this effect requires you to equip the weapon for more than 10 seconds before you get the effect. The next EX augment is Fortune Sign over here. Again, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor plus 2%, 20% chance that rest assign or reverse assign will not be consumed when used. Again, effect starts 10 seconds after equipped, so you can't use the fast swap mechanic over here. You have to keep this on either your main weapon, or if it's a secondary weapon, you need to hold on to that secondary weapon for more than 10 seconds for the effect to kick in. Now, this is very nice. It's very similar to like the Waker subclass. It's one of the reasons why I rocked Waker subclass when we were still learning Darkfall's Dalian, Darkfall's Solus, because I was able to just spam heals and never run out because of this 20% chance that it won't consume my rest assign or my healing items. So this was really nice to have. However, is it necessary? Probably not. Next up is EX Gradual PP Gauge. This is potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, recover 7 PP every 5 seconds. This is actually really nice because it just gives you flat 7 PP every 5 seconds. There's no conditions to this, you simply just recover 7 PP every 5 seconds, which is really nice. Next up is EX Gradual Pressing. This is the most common one that you're going to see on the majority of your new 11-star rarity weapons, because this is just one of the most common ones that drop. However, this is actually a really good augment, even though it's super common. It's potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, increase down factor to enemies by 5% every 10 seconds, and it caps out at 20%. So what down factor actually does is it increases the chances of you downing the enemy. So all boss enemies have an invisible down gauge. It's basically the same as their break gauge, however you just don't see it, and when you guys deal enough damage and drain that down gauge, the boss will go into a physical down or elemental down, and you'll be able to deal tons of damage. So what this EX augment does is you simply just deal more damage to that invisible gauge. It's one of the main reasons why we run Bouncer subclass. It's so that we can down the enemy much faster. Very useful against bosses, so do not sleep on this. Even though it's super common, it's actually one of the best EX augments in my personal opinion. Next up is EX Heavy Attack Protect. As you can see right here, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, damage resistance plus 15% against boss enemies. This is correct, all right? The translation over here is correct, but in-game it does not say this. It still says non-boss enemies in-game. But just understand that the heavy attack will give you 15% damage resistance against the boss enemies. So Darkfall's Dalian, Darkfall's Solus, all of the Darkfalls type of stuff, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna take 15% less damage against them. This is really good if you just want more defensive stats. As I said earlier, I do prefer defensive stats, so this is pretty good in my books. But moving on to the next one, which is EX Hysterical Strength. This is a very offensive based one, as the name implies. It's potency plus 4%, not 4.5%. Potency floor increased by 2%. However, during ailment, potency plus 2%, offensive PP recovery plus 10%, as well as damage resistance plus 10%. So in order to get the maximum 6% potency over here, you need to have an ailment or a debuff on you. So this can be any debuff, whether you're poisoned, whether you're burning, whether you're shocked, whether you're frozen. Now, obviously with frozen and stun, you won't be able to deal damage since you can't move and you can't do anything. So you won't be able to take advantage of this 2% extra potency. But with burning as well as poisoned and stuff like that, you can definitely take advantage of this and gain 6% more potency instead of the normal 4.5% that all of the other augments give you. But again, there is another EX augment that synergizes with this very well, but we'll go over that later. Next up is Just Frame Counter, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%. Sidestep counter occurs when you perform a normal attack after you break, fall, a launcher, or knockback. Now, originally, or yesterday's video, I said that this was more of a Braver exclusive. However, that is incorrect. Every single class can actually break fall by timing their jump the moment they hit the ground. And what Just Frame Counter does is it actually allows you to do a mini gap closer the moment you get back up, because it does a sidestep counter, which actually pushes your character forward. So think of it as a mini gap closer if you get hit too far from the boss, because when the boss launches you or knocks you back, you're obviously flying away from the boss. So if you time your jump perfectly, you can get back up and then press normal attack and immediately gap close the distance that you were actually pushed away from. So this is incredibly useful for certain classes such as the fighter, which needs to be really close up to the boss. Now, obviously, if you're playing like a force or a ranger or something that's, wants to play slightly further away, this might not be the best one to take, but definitely for fighter, for braver, for classes that want to be up close and personal, I think this is pretty nice. But it requires you to get hit, right? You need to get launched backwards or knocked back. So obviously, if you play optimally and you don't get hit, well, then this just doesn't really do much. So just understand the strength and weaknesses of this augment. Next up is EX Light Attack Protect, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor plus 2%, damage resistance plus 30% against non-boss enemies. This is really good if you're just fighting a bunch of regular enemies. Now, something to keep in mind is this might be very useful for Ark's Records, or might be very useful for Geometric Labyrinth, where you have to fight a bunch of random enemies. However, just understand that, this might not be for everyone, as, the majority of the hard content is actually boss enemies, and that is usually where you want the damage resistance. Against regular mobs, maybe not so much, unless maybe you're farming in the Nameless City and you have maximum points and you're kind of scared of getting one shot, then sure, you could rock this. But personally, I don't really see a lot of value in this, as most normal mobs are not able to one-shot you. Next up is EX Lively HP Starlings. This is my favorite one because it simply complements my playstyle the best and complements the majority of the player base's playstyle, I would assume. But as you can see, potency plus 4%, potency floor increased by 2%. When HP is 95% or greater, we gain an additional potency plus 1.5% as well as damage resistance plus 5%. So this is super simple. When you're healthy, 95% HP or above, you gain 5.5% potency, you gain 5% damage resistance, and you get the potency floor increase. Personally, I think this one provides the most value for any build, like regardless whether you're super defensive, whether you're super offensive, any build out there, I think Lively HP Starlings is going to provide some value, unless you're going with the hysterical build with the crazy self-burn and all of that. However, we'll talk about that in the next segment of this video. The next EX augment is Patient Defense over here, where it's potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, damage resistance plus 15% on HP decrease up to 25% maximum, bonus resets if no damage is taken after 30 seconds. So this is really good if you're fighting an enemy that hits you multiple times in very quick succession. I can think of Bujin, for example, Resetsu, for example. These bosses hit you multiple times in a very short time frame, so by having this, you'll take less and less damage the more times you get hit. However, it does cap out at 25% damage resistance. So, this could be good, especially if you are having trouble fighting certain enemies that hit you multiple times in a short time frame. The next EX augment is Risky Stance, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, 30% chance to recover 10 PP when hit by an attack. There is a 5-second cooldown for this, and 10% chance of dealing 1 damage to yourself, and there's a 10-second cooldown for this. So the second half of Risky Stance, 10% chance of dealing 1 damage to yourself, isn't really worded well. What it actually means is every single time you attack an enemy, there is a 10% chance of dealing 1 damage to yourself. Now, once you deal that 1 damage to yourself, there's a 10-second cooldown, so you don't like absolutely obliterate yourself if you have very fast attack speed, but taking that 1 damage is actually a good thing because it actually synergizes with itself, where it gives you that 30% chance to recover 10 PP when you get hit by an attack. Self-damage counts as an attack because you're dealing damage to yourself, so it's giving you that 30% chance to recover 10 PP. So this is a very interesting, very RNG type of EX augment, because basically you're attacking really quickly, you have a chance of dealing 1 damage to yourself. When you deal 1 damage to yourself, there's a 30% chance that you recover 10 PP. So it kind of feeds itself, but it's kind of weird because there's a lot of RNG, right? You're attacking a lot, 10% chance of dealing 1 damage, and then every time you take that 1 damage, there's a 30% chance of recovering 10 PP. Kind of weird, but nevertheless, it might work with some builds, but I just haven't figured anything out yet. Next up is EX Shortage HP Starling. Potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%. When HP is at 50% or lower, potency increased by 1.5%, damage resistance plus 30%. So this is the second EX augment that actually gives you 6% potency because 4.5% plus 1.5%. So that is actually really, really powerful. However, this requires you to stay at 50% HP or lower. And so you're going to need to do some HP manipulation, or you're going to have very specific EX augments that deal a lot of self-damage in order to burn yourself and get your HP down to below 50% and maintain that. And with that said, we can move on to the next EX augment, which is the burning one. This is the one that a lot of people have been looking at. This is the one that Chrono Catastrophe uses himself. And honestly, I don't really recommend it, but we'll go over it anyway. So there is the EX Shortage PP Burn Up. Potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%. Burn occurs when 100 PP is consumed. During burn, natural PP recoveries increased by 30%, burn potency decreased nullified. So what this EX augment actually does is every time you use more than 100 PP, you set yourself on fire. And if we take a look at what the burn debuff actually does, the player character starts burning and has their HP gradually reduced. Their damage dealt is also reduced. However, the damage dealt reduced debuff is actually negated, as you can see right here. Burn potency decrease is nullified. So even though you're burning, if you have this EX augment over here, you will not suffer the attack decrease of 10%. However, something that you need to keep in mind, and a lot of people overlook this, is this stacks. Burning can burn all the way up to level 5. So let's say that you burn 100 PP, you're gonna get this debuff over here. Basically, the burn is gonna deal 1% of your maximum HP every 2 seconds. This is pretty significant. However, if you burn another 100 PP, the burn effect is gonna level up to level 2, where you're going to lose 1.1% of your maximum HP every 2 seconds. And then level 3, level 4, level 5. So after burning 500 PP, you're going to be dealing 1.5% of your maximum HP every 2 seconds. This is incredibly painful and you will lose HP at Mach speed. It's actually insane how fast your HP drains down because it's happening every 2 seconds. However, because you're burning yourself so quickly, it actually synergizes with a lot of other EX augments. A great example is the augment right above it, Shortage HP Starling. You want to be below 50% in order to gain 6% potency. This is super nice. And remember earlier Hysterical Strength, where you gain 6% potency as long as you have an ailment on you? Well, if you're burning, that's an ailment. You debuffed yourself, so you gain another 6% potency over here. So there are a lot of EX augments that actually synergize with Shortage PP Burn Up, which is really nice. However, just understand that you will burn yourself all the way down to 1 HP. Now, you cannot kill yourself with the burn. Debuffs can actually kill you. However, once you're at 1 HP, literally anything can one-shot you regardless of how much damage resistance you have. Because you might be like, oh, I've got 30% damage resistance over here, and then, you know, I've got all of these other damage resistance things that kick in when I'm at low HP. It's not gonna matter because you have 1 HP and anything's just gonna deal 1 damage and you're gonna die. So personally, I don't really like this. However, for short fights, it will be super effective. I think a lot of speedrunners are gonna be using this because it's just like, listen, just don't get hit forehead. I'm just gonna burn through everything, and the only thing I care about is potency. Because remember, the Shortage HP Starling as well as the Hysterical Strength both give you 6% potency. So that is significantly higher than the average 4.5% on all of the other augments. So that is something to keep in mind, that, hey, you are sacrificing your HP and your tankiness and just forcing yourself into this glass cannon playstyle. However, you are getting a lot of damage in return. Again, personally, I do not like this build, but if you are a speedrunner or if you do like the glass cannon build, this is something that you can look at. But when the new Dark Falls comes out, it's gonna absolutely kick your butt because it's gonna be almost impossible to take 0 damage the entire fight. But nevertheless, the option is out there if you want it. Now the next EX augment is Sign Shielding over here. Potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, damage resistance plus 20% once per use of Rest Assign or Reverse Assign. Can use Rest Assign even when max HP. So this is basically whenever you heal yourself, you're gonna get this shield around you that gives you 20% damage resistance for 1 single hit. This is pretty nice, and you can use the Rest Assign whenever you want, you know, even if you're full HP, so that you could always get this damage resistance plus 20% damage bubble around you, which is really nice. But you know, you're gonna need to burn through your Rest Assigns quite a lot if you're constantly getting hit in order to ensure that you have this bubble all the time. Next up is EX Stealth Wall, potency plus 4%, as well as potency floor increased by 2%, damage resistance plus 10% against enemies targeting you, but potency plus 1.5% against enemies not targeting you. So this is another really good one because this gives you 5.5% potency as long as you do not have the aggro. So for me, this is great because I play a lot with Emiko. Emiko's freaking busted. They're rocking 260% potency. There's literally no scenario where I will actually take aggro. So by running EX Stealth Wall, I'm always gonna have that extra 5.5% potency, which is really, really nice. However, if we swap positions, in Emiko's case, Stealth Wall is absolutely useless because you're just gonna gain the 10% damage resistance since you're always gonna have aggro, and so you don't want to take Stealth Wall because you always have the aggro. Now, if you're a solo player, this is also not so good, but again, most of the end game content is group play and mainly against bosses, so as long as you don't have the aggro, this is a really good augment to have because it gives the second highest potency at 5.5%. Next up is the Tex Arms PP Suppress, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, PP consumption minus 15% when using different PAs or techniques. This is pretty useful if you're constantly switching PAs. Let's say that, you know, the class that you play needs to chain different combos together or different PAs together or techniques together in order to deal optimal damage, then this is nice as it will reduce your PP consumption and thus you can deal even more damage. Now the last two are my favorites. It is EX Tough Mind, potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, an incapacitating attack will leave you at 1 HP and a moment of invulnerability, 300-second cooldown, effect starts 10 seconds after equipped. This is one of my favorite augments over here simply because it gives me Iron Will. Iron Will lets you survive. It's a cheat death mechanic and it's very, very valuable. For me personally, I put a lot of value on this because it allows me to make silly mistakes or allows me to bypass certain mechanics altogether. A great example is Dark Falls Solus. At the very last phase, he does this giant explosion. However, if you have this, you can literally stand in the explosion and it doesn't matter because you're going to survive at 1 HP. So this is really, really nice to have. Just understand that it does have a 300-second cooldown, which is 5 minutes, versus if you have the regular Iron Will on a Hunter main class, that is only 180 seconds cooldown. But something to keep in mind is if you are a Hunter main class, you can actually have Tough Mind and Iron Will both at the same time, and that way you have 2 cheat deaths at any given time, which is really crazy. But please understand that Tough Mind will proc first and then Iron Will proc second, okay? But nevertheless, this is one of my favorite EX augments because it allows me to bypass a lot of mechanics and play very Unga Bunga like. Now my second favorite EX augment is Tri Shield. Potency plus 4.5%, potency floor increased by 2%, generate 3 shields that negate enemy damage but has a 120-second cooldown after all shields are lost. Now something to keep in mind about this augment over here is it does not have the requirement of effect starts 10 seconds after being equipped. So you can literally put this on a second weapon, and the moment you're about to get hit, you can switch to that weapon, which will give you the 3 shields in order to negate any enemy damage. Just understand that the shields can only negate damage that you can normally block. If it is an unblockable attack, the shield does not work. It will not negate it. So let's say Darkfall Solace again does like a one-shot ability on you. Even with the Tri-Shield, it's not going to negate the one-shot. You're still going to get one-shot and die. Unless, of course, you have Tough Mind, where you survive at 1 HP. So, in my personal opinion, I like to rock both of these. I like Tough Mind, I like Tri-Shield, and then I also like to have the Lively HP Starlings, as it does give you 5.5% potency as long as you're 95% HP or above. These are the 3 EX augments that I personally like to run. However, with that being said, let us actually go over different possible combinations of EX augments. So the first combination I want to go over is the Glass Cannon build, because I know a lot of people just care about big numbers and big damage. So in order to deal the most amount of damage, you're going to want to have EX Shortage PP Burn Up. This is the one that burns you whenever you use 100 PP. Now in order to take full advantage of the HP drain, you're going to need EX Shortage HP Starling, which is going to give you 6% potency when you're lower than 50% HP. And since you're burning yourself, you're literally always going to be at 1 HP anyway. So this is going to be really nice as it does give you the most potency. And then for your last EX augment, you're going to take Hysterical Strength, as this also gives you another 6% potency. So that's going to be really nice. Now, if you're looking for a more balanced build, I highly recommend Lively HP Starlings. This is the one where if you're at 95% HP or higher, you gain 5.5% potency. This is very, very powerful. And to pair with that, I would take Stealth Wall, which gives you another 5.5% potency as long as the enemies are not targeting you. And then to top things off, I would take Dazzle Camouflage, which decreases the amount of threat that you generate on your attacks so that you can guarantee that you never take aggro, so that you could always benefit from the extra 5.5% potency increase times 2, because you have 2 EX augments that give you 5.5% potency. So that is the combination I would recommend for the average player for a more balanced build. Now, if you're like me and you prefer a more defensive build, the first one I would take would be Lively HP Starlings. Again, at 95% HP or above, you get 5.5% potency. And then we'll scroll all the way down here and we will take both defensive EX augments over here with Tough Mind, which gives you a cheat death mechanic, as well as Tri-Shield, which gives you 3 hits that negates any sort of damage. So this is incredibly defensive. However, it fits my playstyle perfectly because I'm more than happy to sacrifice a little bit of damage. It's literally 0.5% to 1% potency. It's not that big of a deal in order to just have quality of life where I could just unga bunga, blindfold myself, face roll on the keyboard, and still kill the enemy. So this is my personal favorite. However, as I said at the very beginning of the video, it is all personal preference. There is no wrong combination between all of these EX augments. You can literally use any of the EX augments, just get the extra 4.5% potency as well as the 2% floor potency, and you're good to go. All of the rest is just kind of bonuses that add on top of each other, but by having the EX augments synergize with each other, you're simply enhancing your playstyles so that it makes your life a lot easier. So if you want to go Glass Cannon, you can go on to the Burning build. If you want the balanced one, where it's like 5.5% potency on 2 of the EX augments, you can go with that one. Now, if you want a super tanky build, you can use exactly what I do with the Tri-Shields as well as the Cheat Death, and then with the HP Starlings, just, giving you that extra 5.5% potency, which is definitely really nice.
Special thanks to all the members for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me. Thank you again.
But yeah, that's all I wanted to cover in today's video. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. If you did, I would appreciate a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye.